On our first day in my husband's hometown, 3 different strangers stopped me on the street. They all said the same thing. You look just like her. I had no idea who they were talking about. My husband said they were confused, but when I found an old newspaper clipping hidden in his childhood bedroom, I finally understood why he married me, and I finally understood what happened to the woman who disappeared on her wedding day 22 years ago. My name is Gemma Hollister. I'm 44 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had finally found the love of my life. I thought I had found a man who saw me for who I truly was. I thought I had been given a second chance at happiness after years of loneliness and a painful divorce. I was wrong about all of it. My husband Warren is 48. He's an architect. He's charming and thoughtful and remembers every small detail about the things I like. He brought me flowers on random weekdays. He held my hand in public like he was proud to be with me. He made me feel special in a way no one ever had before. But Warren had secrets, big ones. He told me his parents were dead when we first started dating. He said he had no family left. He never talked about where he grew up or the life he lived before we met. I thought he was just a private person with a painful past. I thought he would open up when he was ready. I never imagined the truth was so much darker. The woman everyone said I looked like was named Rosalind Templeton. People called her Rosa. She was 26 years old when she vanished on her wedding day 22 years ago. She was supposed to marry Warren that morning. She never made it to the church. Her car was found abandoned on a mountain road. Her body was never recovered, and Warren was questioned by police but never charged. If you want to know what really happened to Rosa and why my husband spent 20 years looking for someone who looked exactly like her, stay with me, because this story changed everything I thought I knew about love, marriage, and the man sleeping next to me every night. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love hearing from all of you, and your support means everything. Now let me take you back to where this all began. I met Warren at a bookstore in Denver 4 years ago. I was 40 years old and had been divorced for almost a decade. I had stopped believing I would ever find love again. I had made peace with being alone. I filled my life with books and quiet evenings and long walks through the city. It wasn't exciting, but it was safe. And after my first marriage ended in betrayal, safe felt like enough. I was working behind the counter that evening when Warren walked in. He was tall with graying hair at his temples and kind blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He was looking for a book on regional architecture for a project he was working on. I helped him find it. Then we started talking. We talked about buildings and cities and the way spaces can make you feel certain emotions. We talked until the store closed, and then we kept talking in the parking lot for another hour. He asked for my number before he left. I almost didn't give it to him. I had been hurt before, and I didn't trust easily anymore. But something about Warren felt different. He seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. He looked at me like he was seeing me, really seeing me, not just looking through me like so many people did. We started dating a few weeks later. Everything moved slowly at first. Warren was patient. He didn't push for anything I wasn't ready for. He remembered small things I mentioned and surprised me with them later. Once I said I loved lavender, and the next week he brought me a potted lavender plant for my apartment. He paid attention in a way that made me feel valued. Within 6 months, we were serious. Within a year, we were talking about the future. He proposed on a rainy Sunday afternoon in my tiny kitchen. He got down on one knee beside my coffee maker and asked me to spend the rest of my life with him. I said yes, without hesitating. I was 41 years old, and I had given up on this ever happening. It felt like a miracle. We got married at the courthouse with just a few friends present. I wore a simple cream dress. Warren wore a gray suit. We went to dinner afterward at a quiet Italian restaurant. It wasn't fancy, but it was perfect. I didn't need a big wedding. I just needed him. The first 2 years of our marriage were happy. We lived in my apartment in Denver. Warren worked from home most days, designing buildings for clients all over the country. I continued managing the bookstore. We fell into easy routines. Coffee together in the mornings, walks in the evening, movies on the couch with takeout on Friday nights. I felt settled in a way I never had before, but there were things about Warren that always bothered me a little. He never talked about his past. When I asked about his childhood, He gave vague answers and changed the subject. He told me his parents died years ago, and he was an only child. He said there was nothing worth remembering about where he grew up. I assumed he had a difficult family history. Some people don't like revisiting painful memories. I didn't push. Then 6 months ago, everything changed. Warren came home one evening looking shaken. He said he had received a call from a lawyer in North Carolina. His mother was alive. She had suffered a stroke and needed someone to care for her. He said he was sorry for lying to me about her being dead. He said the relationship was complicated, and he hadn't spoken to her in years. He said he needed to go back to his hometown to help her. I was hurt that he had lied. I was confused about why he would tell me his mother was dead if she wasn't. But Warren seemed genuinely upset. He apologized over and over. He said he would explain everything once we got there. He asked me to trust him. I wanted to be a supportive wife. I agreed to move to a small town in North Carolina that I had never heard of. The town was called Briar Falls. It sat in a valley surrounded by mountains, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone and strangers stand out immediately. The main street had a diner, a hardware store, a small grocery, and an old library. There were maybe 2,000 people living there. The air smelled like pine trees and wood smoke. When we drove through town for the first time, I noticed people stopping to stare at us. I figured they were just curious about newcomers. Small towns are like that, but something about the way they looked at me felt strange. They weren't just curious. They seemed almost afraid. I mentioned it to Warren and he said I was imagining things. He said small town folks are just nosy. I believed him because I had no reason not to. We moved into Warren's childhood home, a 2-story house on the edge of town that had been empty for years. It was dusty and needed work, but it had good bones. Warren said we would fix it up together. I tried to be optimistic. I told myself this was an adventure. I told myself this would bring us closer. I had no idea that coming to Briar Falls would destroy everything I thought I knew about my husband. I had no idea that my face would unlock a secret this town had been keeping for over 2 decades. And I had no idea that the man I married had been searching for me long before we ever met. On our first full day in Briar Falls, I decided to walk into town while Warren unpacked boxes at the house. I wanted to explore a little and get a feel for the place that would be my new home. The morning air was crisp, and the mountains in the distance were beautiful. I felt hopeful despite all the changes. I thought maybe this move would be good for us. I found the local diner on Main Street and walked in to get a cup of coffee. The bell above the door jingled, and everyone inside turned to look at me. That's normal in small towns. Strangers get noticed, but the woman behind the counter didn't just notice me. She froze completely. The coffee pot in her hand tilted and nearly spilled. Her face went pale like she had seen something impossible. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she said, "Lord have mercy, you look just like her." I smiled politely and asked who she meant. The woman shook her head quickly and muttered that it was nothing. She was probably thinking of someone else. She poured my coffee with trembling hands and wouldn't look at me again. I paid and left feeling confused and unsettled. On my walk home, it happened 2 more times. An older man coming out of the hardware store stopped dead in his tracks when he saw me. He took off his hat and pressed it to his chest like he was looking at a ghost. He whispered something under his breath that sounded like a prayer. When I said good morning, he just shook his head and hurried away. A few minutes later, a woman pushing a stroller crossed to the other side of the street to avoid passing me. She kept glancing back over her shoulder with wide, frightened eyes. I got home and told Warren about the strange encounters. I asked him who this woman was that everyone thought I looked like. He laughed and said people in small towns are superstitious. He said I probably just resembled someone who used to live there. When I pushed for more details, his expression tightened. He said he didn't want to spend our first week here talking about old gossip. He said we should focus on getting settled. Then he walked out of the room and I heard him rummaging through boxes in the garage. A few days later, Warren took me to meet his mother at the assisted living facility where she was recovering from her stroke. I was nervous. I had never met any of Warren's family. I wanted to make a good impression despite the difficult circumstances. I brought flowers and practiced what I would say on the drive over. Colleen Hollister was 74 years old. She was frail and thin, propped up in a hospital bed with tubes connected to her arm, but her eyes were sharp and clear. Those eyes locked onto me the moment I walked through the door. She didn't smile. She didn't say hello. She just stared at me with an expression I couldn't read. Then she looked at Warren and said in a voice like gravel, "Why would you do this?" Warren told his mother she was confused. He said the stroke had affected her memory. He guided me out of the room quickly, saying she needed rest. But I saw the look that passed between them before we left. Colleen wasn't confused. She knew exactly what she was saying, and whatever it meant, it scared her. The weeks that followed were filled with strange moments. People in town avoided making eye contact with me. Conversations stopped when I walked into the grocery store. The woman at the post office asked for my name twice, like she didn't believe the answer. I felt like everyone knew something I didn't. I felt like I was walking through a play where everyone else had read the script except me. Warren started acting differently too. He was distracted and short-tempered. He spent hours going through boxes in the house, boxes he told me were just old junk from his father's estate. He said I didn't need to worry about them, but I noticed him sorting through papers late at night when he thought I was asleep. I heard him whispering on the phone in the garage. When I asked who he was talking to, he said it was just work stuff. One afternoon while Warren was visiting his mother, I decided to explore the house more thoroughly. I told myself I was just organizing and getting settled, but really I was looking for answers. I went into Warren's old childhood bedroom and started opening closet doors and dresser drawers. In the back of his closet, behind stacks of old yearbooks and dusty trophies, I found a shoebox. Inside were newspaper clippings, dozens of them, all from 22 years ago. The headlines made my heart stop. Local woman vanishes on wedding day. Search continues for missing bride. Groom questioned in Templeton disappearance. The missing woman's name was Rosalind Templeton. She was 26 years old. She disappeared the morning she was supposed to marry Warren Hollister. And when I looked at her photograph printed in the yellowed newspaper, I finally understood why everyone in town had been staring at me. Rosa looked exactly like me. We could have been twins. I sat on the floor of Warren's closet for a long time. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the newspaper clippings. I read each one over and over, hoping I had misunderstood something, but the words were clear. Rosa Templeton disappeared on her wedding day. Warren was her fiancé. Police questioned him but never had enough evidence to charge him. The case went cold. Her body was never found. I stared at Rosa's photograph until my eyes burned. She had the same auburn hair as me, the same green eyes, the same heart-shaped face. The resemblance was so strong, it made me feel sick. I thought about the day Warren and I met at the bookstore. I thought about how he looked at me that first time, like he was seeing someone he recognized. I had thought it was connection. Now, I wondered if it was something else entirely. I put the shoebox back exactly where I found it. I arranged the yearbooks and trophies in front of it just like before. I couldn't let Warren know I had discovered his secret. Not yet. I needed more information first. I needed to understand what really happened to Rosa before I confronted my husband, because the man I married might be a murderer, and if he was, I needed to be very careful about my next move. That night, I lay in bed beside Warren and watched him sleep. His face looked peaceful. His breathing was slow and steady. He looked like the same kind and gentle man I had fallen in love with. But I couldn't stop thinking about Rosa. I couldn't stop wondering if he had done something terrible to her. And I couldn't stop asking myself if I was safe in this house with him. The next morning, I told Warren I wanted to explore the town a bit more. He seemed pleased that I was trying to settle in. He kissed me on the forehead and said he would be working from home all day. I smiled and acted normal. Then I walked to the public library on Main Street. The librarian was an older woman named Opal Finch. She had white hair pinned back in a neat bun and glasses on a chain around her neck. She looked up when I walked in, and I saw recognition flash across her face. She knew who I looked like, but unlike everyone else in town, she didn't seem afraid. She seemed sad. I told Opal I was interested in local history. I asked if the library had archives of old newspapers. She studied my face for a long moment before nodding slowly. She led me to a back room filled with microfilm machines and boxes of old records. Before she left, she paused at the door. She said quietly, "I knew Rosa. She was a sweet girl. Whatever you're looking for, I hope you find the truth." Then she walked away. I spent hours in that room reading everything I could find about Rosa's disappearance. I learned that Rosa was a kindergarten teacher who grew up in Briar Falls. She and Warren had been together since high school. Everyone thought they were the perfect couple, but there were rumors. Some articles mentioned that friends had noticed Rosa becoming withdrawn in the months before the wedding. One article quoted a neighbor who said Rosa had tried to break off the engagement once before, but Warren convinced her to stay. On the morning of her wedding, Rosa left her parents' house alone. Her car was found abandoned on a mountain road outside town. Her wedding dress was still hanging in her childhood bedroom. She never made it to the church. Search parties combed the mountains for weeks, but found nothing. Warren was questioned multiple times. He said he had no idea where Rosa went. He said they were happy. He said he was devastated. That night, I called my sister Blythe in Denver. She was the only person I trusted completely. I told her everything, the newspaper clippings, the photograph, the way everyone in town looked at me like I was a ghost. Blythe was horrified. She told me to leave immediately. She said I could stay with her as long as I needed, but I told her I couldn't leave yet. I needed to know what happened to Rosa. I needed to know if my husband killed his first fiancée, and I needed to know if he married me because he loved me or because I reminded him of the woman he lost. Blythe made me promise to be careful. She made me promise to call her every day. Then she said something that stuck with me. "Gemma, if he did something to her, he could do something to you. Don't let your curiosity get you killed." I started keeping a journal hidden in the lining of my suitcase. I wrote down everything I learned. I began asking careful questions around town, pretending to be interested in local history, and I watched Warren more closely than ever, looking for cracks in the man I thought I knew. A week after I found the newspaper clippings, Opal Finch called me at home. Her voice was low and serious. She asked if I could meet her at the library after closing time. She said she had something important to tell me, something she had never shared with anyone before. I agreed immediately. I spent the rest of the day trying to act normal around Warren, but my mind was racing with possibilities. What did Opal know? What had she been keeping secret all these years? That evening, I told Warren I needed to take a walk to clear my head. He barely looked up from his laptop. He said to be careful and went back to whatever he was working on. I walked through the quiet streets of Briar Falls as the sun went down behind the mountains. The air was cool and smelled like pine. By the time I reached the library, the sky was dark and the streetlights had flickered on. Opal was waiting for me at the back entrance. She looked nervous but determined. She let me inside without saying a word and led me through the dark stacks of books to a small reading room in the back. We sat across from each other at an old wooden table. The only light came from a small lamp in the corner. Opal folded her hands on the table and took a deep breath before she started talking. She told me that on the morning of Rosa's wedding, she saw Rosa driving through town alone. It was very early, before most people were awake. Rosa stopped at the library to drop off some overdue books. The library wasn't officially open yet, but Opal was there preparing for the day. Rosa came inside, and her face was wet with tears. Her hands were shaking. Opal asked her what was wrong. Rosa said she couldn't go through with the wedding. She said Warren wasn't who everyone thought he was. She said she had to leave Briar Falls and she was never coming back. Opal was stunned. She asked Rosa to explain. Rosa shook her head and said there wasn't time. She said Warren would come looking for her soon. She begged Opal to keep her secret. She said she was terrified of what Warren would do if he found her. Opal made a decision in that moment that changed both their lives. She helped Rosa disappear. Rosa had been planning her escape for months. She had slowly emptied her bank account without Warren noticing. She had bought a bus ticket to California under a fake name. She had packed a small bag with the essentials and hidden it in her car. She had thought of everything. She just needed to get out of town before anyone realized she was gone. Opal told me that Rosa didn't vanish mysteriously. She wasn't killed. She ran away. She chose to disappear because she believed it was the only way to escape Warren safely. She had been living under a new name in a small town in Oregon for 22 years. She never married. She never had children. She never came back to Briar Falls. But once a year, she sent Opal a letter letting her know she was alive and safe. I sat there, trying to process what I was hearing. Rosa was alive. Warren didn't murder her. The wave of relief that washed over me was so strong I almost started crying, but the relief didn't last long. If Rosa was so afraid of Warren that she faked her own disappearance, what did that say about the man I married? What had he done to make her feel like vanishing was her only option? Opal reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph. She slid it across the table toward me. The photo showed an older woman standing in front of a modest house with a garden full of colorful flowers. She had gray-streaked auburn hair and smile lines around her eyes. She looked peaceful and content. It was Rosa, 22 years older but unmistakably her. She had survived. She had built a new life for herself. She was okay. I thanked Opal for trusting me with the truth. She squeezed my hand and told me to be careful. Then I walked home through the dark streets, with my thoughts spinning in 100 different directions. Warren wasn't a murderer, but he was something else. Something that made a woman so desperate to escape that she erased her entire existence. I needed to understand what that something was. I needed to hear the truth from Warren himself. When I walked through the front door, Warren was sitting in the living room. The television was off. The house was silent. He was just sitting there in the dim light, waiting. His face was pale, and his expression was unreadable. He asked where I had been. His voice was calm, but there was tension underneath it. I didn't answer his question. I sat down in the chair across from him and looked him straight in the eye. I said, "I know about Rosa. I know she didn't die. I know she ran away from you. I found the newspaper clippings hidden in your closet. I talked to people who remember what happened. I know everything, Warren." He stared at me for a long moment. I watched his face cycle through several emotions. First shock, then fear, then something that surprised me. Relief. He let out a long breath and leaned back in his chair. He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, he looked exhausted, like a man who had been carrying a heavy weight for decades and was finally ready to set it down. He said, "I've been waiting for this conversation for 22 years. I'm tired of lying. I'll tell you everything." Warren admitted he always knew Rosa ran away. He knew she wasn't dead. He knew she had planned her escape and succeeded. But he never told anyone because the truth was worse than being suspected of murder. The truth was that he had been controlling and possessive throughout their entire relationship. He monitored who she talked to. He decided which friends she could see. He criticized what she wore. He made her feel stupid and helpless. He convinced her she couldn't survive without him. He isolated her from everyone who loved her until she felt completely alone. Rosa tried to leave him once before the wedding. Warren broke down crying and begged her to stay. He promised to change. She believed him because she wanted to believe, but he didn't change. He got worse. So Rosa started planning her escape in secret. On her wedding day, she finally found the courage to run. Warren let the town believe Rosa was dead because admitting the truth meant admitting what he had done to her. He was ashamed. He was a coward. He thought if he moved away and started over, he could become a different person. Then he looked at me and said something that shattered what was left of my heart. He said he saw me in that bookstore 4 years ago and couldn't believe his eyes. I looked so much like Rosa that it felt like fate. He pursued me because of that resemblance. He married me, hoping he could rewrite history. He thought if he treated me well, it would make up for how he treated her. I wasn't the love of his life. I was a second chance he didn't deserve. Our entire marriage was built on his guilt and his obsession with a woman who escaped him. I was never truly Gemma to him. I was just a replacement for the ghost he couldn't let go. I sat in that living room for a long time after Warren finished talking. Neither of us spoke. The silence was heavy and thick. I looked at the man I had married and tried to find the person I thought I knew, but he wasn't there. Maybe he never was. The Warren I fell in love with was a performance, a carefully crafted version of himself, designed to make up for the man he used to be. I wasn't his wife. I was his redemption project. I told Warren I needed time to think. He nodded slowly and didn't try to stop me. I went upstairs and packed a bag with enough clothes for a few days. I took my passport and my important documents. I grabbed the journal I had been keeping hidden in my suitcase. Then I walked out the front door without looking back. I drove to a motel on the highway outside of town and checked into a room with a view of the mountains. That night, I called my sister Blythe and told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said she was booking the next flight to North Carolina. She said I shouldn't be alone right now. I cried for the first time since discovering the truth. I cried for the marriage I thought I had. I cried for the woman I thought my husband loved. And I cried for Rosa, who had been brave enough to save herself when no one else would. Before I left Briar Falls, I asked Opal for Rosa's address in Oregon. I wanted to write to her. I felt a strange connection to this woman I had never met. We had both been chosen by Warren for the same reason. We both wore the same face. But Rosa had seen through him before it was too late. I needed her to know that her secret was safe and that she wasn't alone in what she experienced. A month later, I received a letter back. Rosa's handwriting was neat and careful. She thanked me for reaching out. She said she had spent years wondering if Warren would ever face consequences for what he did to her. She said she was sorry I had been pulled into his pattern. She told me that leaving him was the hardest and best decision she ever made. She said she hoped I would find the same peace she eventually found. I moved back to Denver and stayed with Blythe while I figured out my next steps. I filed for divorce immediately. Warren didn't contest it. I think part of him was relieved that the lies were finally over. The paperwork went through quickly and cleanly. I didn't ask for anything except my freedom. I just wanted to be done with him completely. I went back to using my maiden name. I got a job at a small bookstore near Blythe's apartment. I started seeing a therapist who specialized in helping women recover from manipulative relationships. I didn't realize how much Warren had affected me until I started talking about it out loud. He never hit me. He never screamed at me. But there were small ways he controlled things that I hadn't noticed before. The way he decided where we ate dinner. The way he commented on my clothes. The way he made me feel grateful just to be chosen by him. It was subtle, but it was there. Warren stayed in Briar Falls to care for his mother. The town eventually learned the truth about Rosa. Some people blamed him. Others felt sorry for him. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he started going to therapy. I don't know if he genuinely changed or if he just found new ways to perform goodness. It doesn't matter to me anymore. He's not my responsibility. A year after I left Briar Falls, I received an unexpected invitation in the mail. It was from Rosa. She was getting married for the first time at age 48. She had met a man who treated her with kindness and respect. She had finally allowed herself to trust again. She wanted me to come to the wedding. I flew to Oregon and watched Rosa walk down the aisle in a simple white dress. She was beautiful. She was radiant. She was surrounded by friends who knew her real name and her real story. At the reception, Rosa pulled me aside and thanked me. She said my letter helped her finally close that chapter of her life. She said knowing that someone else understood what Warren was capable of made her feel less alone. We exchanged phone numbers and promised to stay in touch. I gained something unexpected from this nightmare. I gained a friend who understood me in ways no one else could. I'm still single. I'm not ready to date again yet. Maybe someday. But for now, I'm focused on rebuilding my relationship with myself. I'm learning to trust my own instincts again. I'm learning that being alone is better than being with someone who only sees a ghost when he looks at you. My husband married me because I looked like the woman who escaped him. He thought he could fix his past by recreating it with a different ending. But people aren't interchangeable. Love isn't about finding a replacement for someone you lost. Real love sees the actual person standing in front of you. Warren never saw me. He only saw what he wanted me to be. I spent 3 years being a stand-in for someone I never met. When I discovered the truth, I had a choice. I could stay and keep playing a role in his story of redemption, or I could leave and start writing my own story. I chose myself. And somewhere in Oregon, the woman I was supposed to replace is finally living the life she always deserved. We both escaped the same man. We both found our way back to who we were before he tried to define us. Rosa taught me that it's never too late to start over. She taught me that running away isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you can do. And she taught me that the face you see in the mirror belongs to you and no one else, no matter who tries to claim it. If you're watching this and someone in your life makes you feel like a replacement or a project or a second chance they didn't earn, I want you to know the truth. You deserve to be loved for exactly who you are, not for who you remind someone of, not for what you represent. You are not a do-over. You are not a ghost. You are real and whole and worthy of someone who sees that. If this story touched you, please subscribe to this channel and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love reading your stories and knowing we're all in this together. Until next time, take care of yourself. You deserve a love that knows your name.